Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today we're doing my March wrap-up. So, in total this month I read 9 books, which is not one of my better reading months this year, but I feel like that always happens. Like, I'll have a couple of really high reading months and then it'll just all kind of go downhill. And then, you know, it's like ebbs and flows. It happens. The 9 books I read, most of them were fucking fantastic, if I'm being honest. Quite a few 5-star reads. I also had some books that I had been anticipating reading for a really long time and sucked ass. So, it'll be a mixed bag here. It'll be really fun and exciting. The first book I finished this month was Blindsided by Eden Finley. I gave this book 4 stars. Eden Finley still got it. I was kind of on the fence about this one because I am part of Eden's like arc list or whatever. Like, her PR person sends me the arcs or whatever. Me specifically, no, like a bunch of different people, the arcs. I'm signed up for them. I get them. Now this series is about people in sports. It can be hockey players, football players, and I think that's all she's done so far, but it's kind of about them in their male-male relationships, right? So the first book I absolutely adored. The second book I thought was trash. And then the third book I was on the fence about. So this was the 4th book in the series. Honestly, I really enjoyed it. It was about Talon and Miller. They have been friends since college, and they have always kind of double-teamed women. I mean, there's really no polite way to put that. Basically, they have sex with women, but they don't have sex with each other. And as the story kind of progresses, they end up, you know, going their separate ways because I believe Talon's a little bit older, and he ends up being kind of like the Tom Brady, like, amazing quarterback. And he ends up on the same NFL team as Miller. They kind of enter into a relationship, and I like it because I think the author did a really good job at showing us the characters' past and why they were together, why they were friends in the first place, and why they should be together now. I also think Eden Finley does an incredible job at telling stories of queer men. She's a straight woman, so I'm not, like, I can't speak to the representation. However, I think this is not a case of a white woman fetishizing gay men, if that makes sense. The sexuality is always handled so impeccably. It's not just, oh, we're in love, cool, awesome, everything's great. You have to deal with the consequences of, like, being a gay man in the NFL, what that's gonna look like. You have to deal with what's your family going to say, those sorts of things. The families in this series are written really incredibly, and I just really love them, and the characters to me always are pretty unique. She usually brings characters from her other books in the series into each subsequent book, and it just feels nice getting to revisit those characters. And it also reminds me that they're all different, their love stories are different, so they're not interchangeable. It didn't feel fetishy to me, even though there's like a sex scene in the opening chapter of the book. I don't know, I really liked this book. I gave it 4 stars, and I'm really excited to see where the series goes. There's going to be an age gap relationship next, I think, which I'm really excited about. I've been like anticipating it for a while. The next book I read was also another 4-star, and it was A Question of Homes by Brittany Cavallaro. Okay, thoughts. This is a continuation, and it's told from Charlotte's point of view, whereas in the previous 3 books we get Jamie's point of view. Mystery, tight. Jamie, tight. Kissing, banter, hand-holding, tight. I can't really go into the details of this because I feel like, you know, it's a series continuation. It's the last book in a series. If you haven't read the previous ones, I don't want to spoil anything, but I think this book was the best in the series for a few reasons. Firstly, it didn't focus so heavily on the mystery aspect, which you would assume would be a bad thing, but to be honest with you, I think 90% of the reason that people read these books in the first place is because the characters. It's not because of the mystery. The mysteries tend to, in my opinion, get a little convoluted near the end and wrap up too quickly. This one, the mystery was very cut and dry. It didn't feel like it was taking too much time away from the character development and growth, which was the biggest thing that happened in this story. Seeing Jamie come to terms with Charlotte as a real, full, developed human being and not as this image of a human being that he has in his mind was really incredible, and watching Charlotte grow from this scared and kind of resentful human being to someone who is enjoying the little things in life, who is getting help for her trauma, was really fantastic to see. I really enjoyed her character development. The only thing I didn't like was the open ending. I do not do well with open endings. They piss me the fuck off, if I'm being honest. It was a satisfying conclusion, but it was extremely frustrating to not know if the characters were going to remain romantically involved. Is that like the most important part of the series? No, I think the characters, the characters' individual development and their relationship together developing was really important. Not in a romantic sense, but in a mutual respect sense was important. So yes, like the romantic part, I guess I don't need an answer, but it would have been nice to have an answer. So the next book I read this month was a 5-star read. Shocking. And it was Jack of Hearts and Other Parts by Elsie Rosen. I listened to this on audio, which definitely heightened my enjoyment of the story because the audiobook narrator was fucking fantastic. I would definitely recommend this audiobook. It was just pure textbook gay perfection. written. This is how more high school books need to be written, honestly. I think it was such a honest look into high school sexual relationships, especially if you were in a sexual relationship in high school. I think you'll probably relate in some way to this book. Basically, the main character, Jack, is asked by his friend to do a sex advice column. Jack is an openly gay guy, pretty wealthy, at a private New York elite high school. And it's just about his sexual exploits and also about the ways in which he conceptualizes sex and what a healthy sexual relationship looks like. It's very sex positive. I honestly am just like taken aback by how I can't describe. Everybody talked about it and I was like, okay, great, like awesome. But until you read it, I don't think you can understand just how honest and unflinching it is. There's discussions of sex, and I would compare the actual sex that's had in this book to something like Sex Education, the Netflix television show, if you've seen it. It is, I mean, sex is present, but it's not a gratuitous, sexy kind of sex. It is sex for the purpose of demonstration of what's healthy and what's not. So there's also kind of like a mystery blackmailing element, which I thought could end up being problematic. I was kind of worried at who the blackmailer was going to be. I was incorrect, and I'm glad that I was incorrect. It ended up teaching a very important lesson, I think, especially for straight white women who fetishize gay men. So anyway, would recommend this book. The next book I read, I talked about quite a bit in my vlog, so I don't want to go too much into it, but it was Mr. Masters by T.L. Swan. I gave this book 2 stars. It was a smutty romance about an au pair named Brielle. She goes to England. She's Australian herself, because Australians are just hot, and that is where she has to be from, right? She travels to the UK with her friend on kind of a gap year situation. They're both 25, but just trying to like escape their lives for a year. So Brielle decides that she's gonna nanny for a single mother. She finds out it's actually a single father once she gets there, and she eventually enters into a romantic relationship with the dude. I did not like the relationship that developed. There was really good tension and really good bones there. Once characters actually boned, things kind of went downhill. There was too much sex, and the way that the book was plotted, and this happens in a lot of romance books, conflicts occur, and then they have sex to make up, and then it's a revolving door, basically, you know? Bad shit happens, they have sex. Bad shit happens, they have sex. And there was really no communication. It was interesting because Brielle at one point says, like, hey, you're a terrible communicator and we need to work on this. And I was like, wow, you're getting it, yes. But it never ended up happening, and she just excused his behavior because he's deep down a really good guy. I also didn't appreciate his treatment of his children. He was like kind of homophobic. Was not my favorite, and I definitely would not recommend this to other people. The next book I read, I also talked about in my vlog. I also have a live show on Carrie's channel for this book. It's Fallen by Lauren Kate. Give it 2 stars. I mean, there's not much to say except for there wasn't a whole lot going on here that was good. It was mostly just garbage, so that's about it. It's like early 2000s, paranormal YA, and it's no Twilight, you know? It's just not. The next book I read was another 5-star read. See, this month, it seems good. It seems good until we get to the end. Fury Born by Claire Legrand. I gave this book 5 stars. It was about a woman/girl. I guess we could call them girls. It was about Riel and Eliana, and they are 1,000 years apart in history, and it's about their like kind of parallel. Can it really be parallel if it's 1,000 years apart? I don't know. It's about their 2 different storylines and how they are dealing with things. It's a fantasy book, so there's fantasy elements. Riel is someone who is able to wield different elements, and in her society people can only wield one element. She can wield all of them, and this kind of ties into a prophecy that whoever has this sort of power is going to corrupt the world and or finish the world. And then Eliana is 1,000 years into the future, and in this future people are under this horrible empire regime and there's no magic anymore, and she's just trying to fight to stay alive. Her mother eventually gets kidnapped, and the story is her trying to find out what happened to her mother, and she finds out other things along the way about her past. So anyway, that's the story essentially. So much that worked here for me. I haven't read fantasy in a long time, so I think that was a really big part of it, but honestly, the 2 characters are unlikable, but they're also so well developed that I think it overcomes that factor, if you will. And I also enjoy unlikable female characters. I ended up really liking both of the male love interest in respective storylines. Thought they were both really fun, and in general, like, this is a world that I'm interested in. I think a lot of people's complaints are about the world building and how things are kind of left up to question, but since it's the first book in a series, I kind of like that things are being revealed as we go along. It wasn't confusing to me personally, so not much else to say. It's just like your textbook, solid ass fantasy, and I enjoyed the fuck out of it. And then we get to the disappointing reads, 2 in a row. Super great. The first one is Curse the Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kemmer. Also read this in a vlog, and I give this book 2 stars. Sometimes a book comes along that is just so mediocre that you wonder how the publisher greenlighted it, and then you wonder why the fuck you picked it up and why it was hyped. That's really the case here. This was not a terrible book. It was just so incredibly mediocre. And I like, no offense to the author, because I'm sure she's great. She usually writes contemporary, and I think this is her first fantasy book, but holy shit. It was a Beauty and the Beast retelling with a girl named Harper from DC. She gets basically snatched up into this fantasy world because she is supposed to be the love interest for the Beast character. She's captured by the Beast's royal guard. His name is Gray. And the story, like, there's just not much there. The characters don't do a very good job at, like, falling in love. I didn't root for their relationship, the actual storyline, figuring out what happened and why he was the Beast and what's happening in the fantasy setting, because while there is a Beast, there is also stuff going on within this fantasy world. The Beast, since he's too busy beasting, he can't take care of his kingdom, and he's facing invasion by a foreign nation. So that's kind of another plot point. My issue really was that the characters, I didn't fucking like them. They were really, really boring. The only interesting character to me was Gray, and apparently Bridget has said that he's not even going to be a love interest option. There's going to be no love triangle. So for me, it's just like, why bother to continue to read this series? And also, God, like, I honestly would rather read ACOTAR, and that is saying some shit. I mean, I like ACOTAR, so that's like probably part of it. Say what you want about Sarah J. Maas, but in my opinion, her characters, at least you have a strong visceral reaction, whether it's like love or hate for them. And I just didn't have any sort of real feelings for these characters, which was not great. The next book that was sadly very disappointing to me was a book that I did a live show on with Dylan from Dylan the Reader for our TJ read along, which has come to an end because this is the last book that we were reading for it. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Okay, where to begin? I gave this 3 stars, which was kind of generous because I really did not enjoy it. And I think a big part of that is because I've read Taylor Jenkins Reid's other books, all but one. I don't like her writing is the big thing. The 2 real big issues that I had were I did not like the writing and I did not like the relationship between Celia and Evelyn. First, the writing. My thing is that Taylor Jenkins Reid, I like that her writing is very easy to grasp. It's not overly flowery, it's very concise, to the point, but the issue is she has too many morally prescriptive things thrown in, and it's kind of incongruous with writing that is very concise. Like, it just, she doesn't lead you to the point. She's like, this is the point. You are supposed to feel this way about relationships because I'm telling you, and I'm not going to show you, I'm just telling you, like, this is what you should think about relationships, which really grated on my nerves. And it was something that annoyed me in her other books, and it annoyed me especially in this one. It makes for a very quotable book, but it's not something that I personally really enjoyed. And I think it also doesn't help that I don't share her opinions on relationships, which brings me to my second point. I did not at all enjoy the relationship between Celia and Evelyn. This book was written in the past. I understand that there were barriers keeping these 2 characters apart, but that was not enough, really, to make the relationship work for me, to excuse the issues that I had. My main issue is that in Taylor Jenkins Reid's books, almost all of her characters, when they get in fights, do shit that, I'm sorry, in real life, people, maybe they do this, but I don't, and as a grown adult, like, I think after the first time doing some stupid shit, you'd learn from it. They say things that can't be taken back. They break up instead of talking about their feelings. They leave their partner without so much as a word. Like, I'm sorry, after doing that once at like 16 years old, that's not something that like grown adult people do. And like I said, I understand that this was a different time period and that things were higher stakes, but oh wow, it was just not excusable to me, and I really, really did not like that. That being said, I did like the fact that Evelyn was kind of an unlikable character. I liked that she was a little bit morally gray. I enjoyed that she used her sexuality as power and that was explored a little bit. That was fascinating to me. I didn't think I would enjoy this book, and I didn't, and I'm a little bit sad about it because I know that it's her like best book, but I will say I'm glad that I got a chance to read it. I'm glad that I can now unhaul it, and yeah, that's pretty much my feelings on it. If you want a full, more concise and more well thought out review, I'll put my Goodreads link down below and you can go find that review. And then the last book that I read this month was a 5-star read for me, and it is going to be one of my favorite books of the year. I can already anticipate it. I can already tell you that. It is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. I mean, honestly, like, what needs to be said that hasn't been said about this book? It comes out, I think, May 14th. I liked this for a reason that I don't think everybody probably will appreciate as much as I did, but the relationship was fantastic. I really did like that. The thing that I loved the most was the way that Casey, and she's not even from Texas, she was able to conjure feelings of my state and of my current town that I'm living in that just made me so appreciative for Austin, for Texas, for everything that it stands for. The ending of the book, feeling just so, like, it was an alternate ending, basically, to what the election in 2016 looked like. Seeing, I don't want to spoil it, but just seeing everything that happened, I mean, I cried. And it wasn't because of the relationship, it was because of the story. I don't know how to really get into the details, because honestly, I'm still emotional. I just finished this book, like, right before I decided to film this wrap-up. If I could recommend one book from this wrap-up to you, it would definitely be this book. I know that it seems overhyped, and I was kind of, like, hesitant to read it because of the hype, but sincerely enjoyed it. The only thing I didn't like, at least at first, was the way that it was written. Third person limited to me is very difficult to get into, and it's very hit or miss. It was a little bit difficult for me to get into this time around, but once I started reading, I just couldn't stop, and I think, God, I don't know what to say. I just love this book. So if you want a delightful, fucking hilarious, heart-wrenching, amazing, male, new adult, rom-com, you need to read this. It was amazing. That is it for my March wrap-up. I'm really looking forward to April. There's going to be a lot more fantasy in the mix, so if you enjoy fantasy, stay tuned. Probably a lot more smut too, because I'm going to need something to break up all that fantasy, but I love all of you guys, and I hope you guys are having a fantastic weekend, and until next time.